Oh, wait, no. Sorry, setting up the webinar at 1 more minute. Okay, Lance, I think we start.
Okay. Are we live?
Yes.
Okay. Aloha, everybody. Before we begin, I just wanted to remind everybody that the second Leina Honua Pi'ilani album that was made available by the North Beach West Maui Benefit Fund and the HK West Maui Community Fund is available digitally streaming and is also available in the physical copy at mele.com. All proceeds will go to Na Leo Kalele from the sale of the physical album and the digital sales. And also to tune in on August 28th at 5:30 on Kanao'Kana's site for the next installment of Mele Hulia Mahi, which will feature additional songs from the Leina Honua Pi'ilani Na Mele Ho album. Thank you. Aloha.
Aloha, Vilina mai kako. Mahalo everyone for joining us tonight. Na Aikane o Maui Cultural Center, Hui Aloha Aina, Ola Haina is co-sponsoring this event with HK West Maui Community Benefit Fund, a nonprofit in West Maui, UH Maui College Hawaiian Studies Department, and the Kue Petition Hui. This is the second year that we're running of the West Maui Kanaka Scholar Series. We probably present this to you via Zoom through HK West Maui's live Facebook. Hooholomua Yola Ka Olelo Hawaii kona Mele with Nicholas Lum. Nicholas is a Ka Haka Ula o Keelikolani PhD student. He is part of the Nahoku Hanohano award-winning band Keoho. As a graduate of Kamehameha Kapalama, Nicholas found his niche through musical and cultural opportunities. He strives to deliver inspiration from previous eras and contributes to modern respect and interest for traditional Hawaiian music. Virtual round of applause for our Kanaka Scholar Series presenter tonight, Nicholas Lum.
Yay, virtual applause. Love it. Okay, let me share this screen really quick. Okay, aloha everybody that's tuning in. I can't see anyone's names or the amount of people watching. It's probably like 2 people, but my name is Nicholas Lum. I was born and raised in Ha'iku He'eia on this island, and I currently live in Waikalua, Kane'ohe. If I were to look at my life, I could probably divide it in 2 pretty substantial components, I guess, and one would be Hawaiian language, Olelo Hawaii, and one would be Mele Hawaii, or Hawaiian song. And because of that, I thought when I went into my being a doctoral student at Ka Haka Ula to write my dissertation on something that kind of combines the 2, because it's something that I'm passionate about and it's something that I have a lot of life experience with so far in my short life. So the title of my presentation, and this is actually my dissertation topic as well, but what I'm presenting today is just a kind of like a shortened version of it, and it deals with the research I've done so far. It's definitely not the whole thing, but just highlighting the main points, I guess. The title of it is Hooholomua Yola Ka Olelo Hawaii kona Mele ia, and a rough translation of that is Hooholomua, or to cause something to progress. Iola ka Olelo Hawaii, so that the Hawaiian language can live, I kona Mele ia, due to its being sung. And I'll go into that more and explain what I mean by that. So for today, we're going to look at 2 main topics, I guess, pretty much. The top left, the innovation part, that's what we're going to talk about. And the balancing part is the how we're going to do it. So my argument is that I think innovation is necessary in Hawaiian music and basically in any kind of cultural art form for linguistic and cultural resilience, with the thought that we can't look at it just from a traditionalist standpoint that we need to only honor what came before and never look to the future to continue it on or to innovate and connect to what's happening right now. And then on the other side, the balancing side, that's my argument of how I think it would work best, which is to take both of this traditionalism side of what came before and this innovation side and kind of melding it together and using that as the new innovation to push forward to continue on what's happened before and as well as to preserve our culture, our language, and so on and so forth. So today we're going to look at three main topics to kind of support what I just said, and we're going to go into it in more depth. The first point, we're going to look at Mele and kind of create a working definition for what Mele actually is, which is actually can be controversial to some people. And we're also going to look at how there's a history of change and innovation when it comes to Mele itself. We're going to look at innovation, which the purpose of it, why it's important, possible benefits we have, challenges that will come up, and some thoughts from some of our local musicians who have been innovative in their own musical practices as well. And then lastly, I'm going to provide an example of how we can do this kind of innovation and how we can make it work. So the first point, we're going to talk about Mele. It's what is it and the history of it. Very loosely, very surface level, Mele is poetry. It's song, Hawaiian poetry and Hawaiian song. Pukui and Elbert explain that it is a song, an anthem, a chant of any kind, a poem, poetry to sing or to chant. The prolific scholar on Hawaiian music, Amy Stillman, she categorizes it as this, and she uses the term Hawaiian song instead of Mele, which is important, I believe. But she says that the term Hawaiian song encompasses all songs in Hawaii and any subject that kind of has to do with Hawaiian culture or Hawaiian language as a theme. And right there, I think we can kind of divide this idea of Hawaiian music and what is Hawaiian music and what is Mele itself. And I think the main difference is that Mele is this term that we have right below here as it's logogenic. And logogenic is a musical term that means that the importance of a song lies in the text and not in the musical treatment. It's like the music is subservient to the text itself, and it's used as a vehicle to deliver the text to its audience. And I think that is one of the main attributes of what makes something Mele. It is a Hawaiian text that all the importance lies in the text itself. And as we see here too with Zach's, my brother's quote, from his master's thesis, he explains how, and Pukui also explained this too before, but he explains how Mele is almost like a spell, that it's when you put so much intention and so much thought into creating something, in writing something, it becomes an elevated form of speech, and it has more power in that sense too. If I were to tell you that I love you, it would mean a lot more if I wrote it in song and I put hours and hours into picking the exact words I want to say to explain exactly how I feel at the exact moment I felt that thing, and then deliver it to you by song. That's such a elevated form of speech and such a more touching, more meaningful presentation. And when we look at it that way too, it's as if that the text itself is the important part and the music is the vehicle to deliver it. It's almost like the packaging, and I'll go into that later, but it's like the packaging that's picked specifically for the intention or for the person that it's written for. And moving on slightly, we're gonna briefly talk about the history of Mele, because there's a lot of different things that have happened, but let's just highlight a few of the big changes and really see how Mele itself went through a lot of change and a lot of innovation. And innovation isn't something that we as Hawaiians do not use and do not accept. If we look far back, pre-Western contact, we have Oli, or chant, which is another support to this idea that Mele is logogenic. Because with Oli, we see that there are texts written with certain function to fulfill a certain intention or a want. And when we look at the melody of it, there's usually no instrument accompaniment. But when we look at the melody of it, it's usually 1, 2, or 3 pitches itself. I mean, that's it. And by looking at that, we can understand that the importance of it didn't lie in how many notes we can pick or how advanced the melody is. It really didn't matter. It was just a vehicle to deliver the text, the intention of what the Haku Mele wanted. If we move forward from that, we have the coming of the missionaries, and they brought with them this style of himeni, or hymn, which is sacred Hawaiian text, glorifying the Christian God, and it has its own musical form. It's a verse-chorus kind of form, where the verse has one kind of melody and then the chorus is sung repeatedly with the same text and a different melody. During that time, we also have this term that Stillman coined, and she calls it himeni type Mele, which is it is the same form as himeni, but it's not sacred text. It is secular text, so basically just not sacred, having to do with issues besides God and religion and things like that. After that, we have the coming of the paniolo. We have leo ki'e that comes with that, or falsetto singing, leo wahine. We have slaki guitar, kiho alu. We have the coming of the ukulele, which already with the coming of those kind of new instruments, we have more facility with our music now and how to set these texts to different forms. After that, we have, in the early 1900s, we have the time of the Tin Pan Alley, which is basically a time when Hollywood exoticized Hawaii and used these kind of nonsensical Hawaiian words to paint this picture of Hawaii for basically marketing, to say that it's this tropical paradise with blue moonlit beaches by a lazy blue lagoon and things like that. This is when hapahale music became a thing. And it also brought that kind of, I believe Stillman calls it the popular song form, where it's in musical terms, it's a 32-bar AABA, where there's a verse, altered verse or a chorus, and then finally finishing with a verse. And if we look at hapahale music, Beyond the Reef, Blue Lay, songs like that, actually not Blue Lay, but Beyond the Reef, they're set to that kind of song form, this AABA, popular, the American Songbook, those kind of things. After that, we have the Hawaiian Renaissance, huge resurgence of cultural pride and pride just to be Hawaiian in general. We see a lot of innovation during this time with mixing Hawaiian text and even just Hawaiian ideas or movements to support Kanaka Maoli, set to different forms of music, and namely it's rock and roll, that we see that we're some of our haku mele are combining popular song forms of the US or of other places, things that a lot of people can relate to during that time, to further spread their word and to get their message across that, you know, it's a great thing to be Hawaiian and we should be proud and we need to revitalize our language, our culture, and all these things. So looking at this too, we see that our our mele has changed over and over and over again. But the interesting thing to think or to see is that the text itself kind of remained the same. It's the musical treatment that really changed, of course, besides hapa music, but this idea, this logogenic idea that the importance lies in the text, that pretty much stayed the same all the way through till now. The last thing I wanted to talk about too, and this was based on a talk that me and my brother had while I was preparing for this, and we kind of looked at the idea of tradition and non-tradition, and what exactly defines something that's traditional. And when I talk about this, I think about some of my friends that are totally not into Hawaiian music or Hawaiian anything, they don't speak or anything like that. But when you ask them, like, well, what do you think traditional Hawaiian music will be? They will easily say artists from the Renaissance, the Hawaiian Renaissance period, and they think that that is traditional Hawaiian music. I believe it is. I believe that a lot of these forms that I just said throughout this history of change and innovation, a lot of them are traditional to us, because I believe tradition is something, or a very good phrase or a very good quote that I like is, today's innovation is tomorrow's tradition. All of the things that are traditional to us now, they were innovative at one point in their time when it was created. But what makes something traditional is that there's repetition to it. Let's say I am a farmer in the 1700s. I found out this new way to cultivate kalo. And because of that, I have, say it's very successful. I have my hoa mahi'ai, they take on what I do too. They look at my innovative practice and they're like, oh yeah, this really works. I'm going to use this too. And this practice becomes practiced in the generations to come and the generations to come. And that becomes a part of the tradition, even though it was an innovation before. So basically, something that's traditional is something that has the reps behind it, that's been accepted into the culture by others, utilized through generations, and it becomes a part of the culture. Something that's non-traditional, it doesn't necessarily mean that it is bad or it's not culturally grounded. It just means that it doesn't have the reps yet. It's still innovative at this point because it didn't have enough time yet to be accepted into the culture, to be prolonged and preserved through generations. Okay, I'm gonna take a sip of water. It's a lot of talking. The next part, we're going to talk about innovation, the purpose of it, why it's important, the benefits that we see. I'm going to bring up some case studies that I researched in other indigenous cultures, some challenges, and some thoughts from some of our local musicians. This is basically a translation of my statement, my thesis statement of my dissertation. And I argue that by setting culturally grounded Hawaiian texts, this is the traditional side, to popular forms of music, the innovative side, a new genre of Hawaiian music is born that is familiar to younger generations, hopefully serving as a bridge that connects this younger audience to Hawaiian language, culture, and the musical forms that came before this. If we look back to those two main ideas that I said about innovation for linguistic and cultural resilience and balancing traditionalism with innovation, we see it right here, that I want to innovate in Hawaiian music, but in a culturally grounded way by balancing culturally grounded text, right? Very solid, culturally appropriate text that uses features of haku mele that have predated us long before, and set that to a different vehicle, a different packaging, like I said, and I'll go into this metaphor too, but different packaging so that it's targeted to a different audience. And the audience to me is even my generation, my friends that don't care at all about Hawaiian music. But what if I set it to very, very good, solid Hawaiian text? What if I set that to music that they like? And the music itself becomes like a hook that they're like, oh my gosh, I really like this music. I wonder what they're saying. I wonder where this came from. And then that's my hope that it serves as a bridge. The metaphor that I like to think about this is like a present, like wrapping a present. The culturally grounded Hawaiian text, the traditional part, is the gift itself. And the musical treatment, or the popular song form, is the packaging around it. So my belief is that the gift is what matters, right, in the present. But if you wrap it, you wrap it in a certain way for the intention, for the person that you're giving the gift to. If I was giving a gift to a young child, I wouldn't, or if I was giving a gift to a 50-year-old man, I wouldn't wrap it in I love pony, I love My Little Pony, wrapping paper, right? It has to be picked for that person. It has to specify itself for that. It has to have the right intention. That's basically what I'm saying. And that's the way that I view this whole thing too, that it's the text, the gift itself that really matters, but we can wrap it in any way that we want. We can wrap, if it's for a younger person, we can wrap it so that they will appreciate that. And then they open it like, oh, wow, the gift. Or we can wrap it in a certain way that we appreciate it, or an older generation appreciates. It's just, it depends on the audience, your target audience. Okay, before we go on, I want to introduce two key terms. And these two key terms comes from a group article that I was privileged to write with a group in this last semester of my my doctorate program. And we wrote an article about this idea of indigenous innovation for linguistic and cultural resilience. And we used different case studies of ourselves. So I did music, and some did translation, some did farming and stuff like that. But with these two terms, we can really see what exactly it is, and especially with this indigenous innovation term, like why something like that is specific and how that differs from just innovation broadly. So indigenous innovation, it's there's actually many articles, many literature written on this. But for the purposes of today, and the way I kind of like to look at it is, it's innovation through retrospection, or it's innovation of an indigenous people by looking to the past to make an informed decision about the future. It's not just innovation just because I think it's cool, or innovation because what's old is old and I just want to make something new because I'm over it. It's about looking to the past, taking inspiration from that, and seeing how you can not make it better necessarily, but how you can preserve that and add more to it, add more to the tradition. The second bullet point, that's kind of an obvious one. It's for indigenous innovation is for the betterment of the entire community. And maybe this actually isn't an obvious point, but to me, indigenous innovation differs itself from innovation itself, because sometimes innovation can be just for the fame and the prestige of that one person that does it. But with indigenous innovation, to me, it's something that it benefits the whole and it doesn't benefit the one, which I believe is something that's prevalent across indigenous cultures around the world, that we work together and we work for the common good of all. And this final point, it's building upon a firm cultural foundation. Like I said before, it's not innovation that just pops out of nowhere. It's really founded upon what came before and building upon that, and constantly doing that so that we have this very connected. It's like a genealogically connected form of innovation that even though I'm creating something new, I'm still tied to what happened before. We also have this idea of resilience. I really like this quote. I took this from our group article. It's by Kermeyer et al. And they say that it is the ability of an entity or system to survive, do well, or perhaps even thrive in the face of adversity, such as all of these things and indirect forms of assimilation. That's exactly what I'm trying to do, really. As we all know, our Hawaiian language, our Hawaiian culture took a huge hit we're definitely, I believe, on the rise now. There's a lot more literacy in Hawaiian language and cultural practices, but if we don't continue this and we don't actively look to get the younger generations involved. And I know me saying younger generations, I'm 26 years old, that sounds terrible, but even my own generation, to get them involved so that we have this trust that it's going to be preserved. It's not going to just die, pretty much. And that's just the really ugly truth, I guess, about it, is that if we don't look to the future and we don't look towards the people that are going to continue this on, it'll end. These are the 3 field studies that I briefly talked about before. In my research, I basically looked for indigenous cultures that innovated their more traditional forms of music and what was the outcome of it. The first one I want to talk about is it was actually a master's thesis. It was written by Cruz in 2015. And he looks at the way jazz and Puerto Rican music, traditional Puerto Rican music, how not only they innovated in Puerto Rican music, but they swapped. Jazz took some features of Puerto Rican music, like Afro-Cuban rhythms and these kind of things. And Puerto Rican music took aspects of jazz and melded that inside. And that's kind of a beautiful, the term is cultural borrowing. It's a beautiful form of cultural borrowing that it's not that one culture is trying to take over the other, but they're actually just equally trading ideas for the betterment of both cultures. Juan Tizal is a jazz composer from Puerto Rican, very famous. He wrote tunes like Caravan and very, very famous jazz standards. And basically when he got busted into the jazz scene, his style, this kind of Puerto Rican, I guess, style influenced jazz and almost created a whole new subgenre of Latin jazz and these kind of different rhythmic ideas and things like that. And then if we look at the Puerto Rican side, we have this man named Pedro Guzman, I believe is how you pronounce it. And he created this genre of a new subgenre of Puerto Rican music, and he called it Jibaro jazz. I believe that's how you pronounce it. And what he basically did was he took traditional Puerto Rican text, he melded that with a jazz musical treatment, but he used traditional Puerto Rican instruments. And that's actually the really cool thing too, is that he's actually using a lot from his culture to express this new genre, this new idea. And the really cool thing about this was that it was widely accepted and it was widely praised by a lot of them. And I believe the reason for that is because he implemented this idea of balancing traditionalism with innovation. He didn't just look at what came before and said, later's with that, I'm going to do something else, right? It's all about jazz now, I want to do jazz. He took what came before, mixed it with his musical treatment of jazz, and he created something new that was actually very beneficial. And I think the way that this relates to what I'm trying to do is, I feel like it could be, as long as we have that kind of balance, that it will be accepted and it will be something that's actually very beneficial for us. Gosh, talking like this is crazy. Okay, now we have innovation in Akan music. This was written by Biko in 2005. And the Akan people are the indigenous people of Ghana, Africa. And what Biko studied is that they have this form of, it's like almost like a community get-together that he calls a socio-musical event. And he relates it actually to like a musical, really. It's where the community comes together and they have song, they have dance, they have acting. And it's like this melding of different generations, and it serves as a form of intergenerational transfer of knowledge as well by telling stories of what came before and even telling current stories. And this is the interesting part about the Akan tradition of music, is that innovation is important to them, extremely important. It's actually expected. In order to keep up with current events and what's happening now, and not just what came before, they actually encourage to innovate, to bring what's new, what's happening new, what's new songs, new dances, stories of today, and meld that into the culture. And eventually, like I said before about the tradition and non-traditional, that becomes a part of the tradition, and that becomes something that's told years from now. So that's something that I found that was very cool. This last article, it was dissertation, sorry, it was written by Prajapati in 18. And he talks about fusion music in the newer communities. The newer people are the indigenous people of Kathmandu. And in his dissertation, he explains that scientists are actually very interested in studying their music and their traditional texts because it reveals this whole side of the world that I guess we don't have a lot of knowledge of right now. So it's actually important to keep these, it's important for many reasons, but it's very important to keep these preserved so that we can learn more about what came before. Recently, there's changes in social structure, and because of that, there's changes in the media as well. I believe that before, women were not allowed to perform their kind of music. But what's happening now is they have this new form of fusion music, and I believe it's like EDM, that kind of like electro dance music, electronica, that kind of music. They're mixing that with traditional text and traditional song, and women are doing it as well. I believe that's why there's kind of trouble there. But the interesting thing about this dissertation is that there's two opposing views. There's a clear line between it. There's some people that think it's blasphemous what they're doing, that they can't be setting their kind of text to this or innovating in this way because it's too much. And then there's the side that's arguing that it's if they don't do it, then it's not going to survive at all. And for our own Hawaiian music, I feel like we don't really need to worry about that, because as long as we have this idea of balancing traditionalism and modern forms of music in mind, and this understanding what Mele actually is, right? It's a logogenic form of music, so that as long as we have the melody and the harmonic treatment subservient to the text itself, we're good. Hopefully, that's my my argument, my hope. These are some challenges, and this first quote I really love because it's through my growing and learning Hawaiian music and gigging around, I can't tell you how many times I've heard this kind of quote. This is a quote by Kimo Anakala Kimo, and it was in one of Stillman's articles. And he says that Auntie Alice Namakelua, she would tell them stuff that, you know, if you like, the way I heard it is, if you like make any kind, then write your own. And God, I don't even know how many times I've heard that in my life. But I feel that we're at a point now with our scholars and our Hawaiian musicians of today that we actually can write our own. That there are many educated scholars of today that have spent a lot of time learning their language, remembering, reclaiming what is theirs as Hawaiians, and even on the hakumele side, learning their craft and the practices of hakumele and what to avoid, what to use, and these various features of poetic features of hakumele itself. And we're only allowed to do that, or we're only able to do that, this generation now, because of what came before and what those who have revitalized our language and were fearless enough to help to reinvigorate our language and culture and make it a normal thing, or to normalize all of these things. This next quote is from Stillman as well, and she talks about the Tin Pan Alley time, like I explained before. and how they wrote this kind of nonsensical Hawaiian that was the innovation right there. Their new song form and this weird Hawaiian that makes no sense. And I believe that perhaps from this time, that's why some of the older generations have this kind of bad taste in their mouth, or this kind of knee-jerk reaction when they hear something like innovation, because this was a form of innovation that was not good for us. It probably wasn't beneficial. It painted this false picture of Hawaii, and it used false ideas too, false language. And but then again, this wasn't innovation in the sense of an indigenous innovation, where it comes from an indigenous person of the community, someone that is learned, that is grounded in the culture and the practice itself. So that's one of the challenges we have too, is innovation from a place from a very shaky foundation, I guess. This next quote is by Pukui, and she explains how, kind of going back to the thing I said about spell too, right? It's spell like Mele. Our haku mele need to be very careful with words, right? They need to have not only a firm grasp on these concepts of haku mele, but they also need to have a very, very strong grasp of fluency, really, of language itself. You use one word and you mean it to mean one thing, but if you don't know all of these other layered meanings that go on for days and days and days, it could be dangerous, especially how I mentioned before that it's an elevated form of speech, right? It has more power behind it, more backing, that if you you write this song and with a certain intention and you let that loose, say it gets super famous and there's a lot of people singing this song now, right? That's a lot of power behind those words that can oftentimes make things come true. And if something was carelessly written, or there was something in there that could have hidden meaning, could be dangerous for some. Oh, sorry. And this last quote too is by Pukui. I love this quote as well. And she just explains that as time goes on, we're going further and further away from understanding, really. Maybe not as much anymore because we have these scholars and students that's researching and all this stuff. But if we don't keep this up and we don't keep digging deeper and looking back and researching and remembering, reconnecting to what we are, we're gonna get to the point that we don't know these things. If this is kind of an extreme example, and if a feature of haku mele is personification, right? It's I personify my lover as a flower. Let's say no one writes about that for hundreds of years. No one uses that kind of personification, or no one's interested in haku mele anymore. No one practices that. That entire concept to Hawaiian people of this personification and why a flower is a lover, we'll lose that. That, like I said before, this is a very extreme example, but I mean, this would take many, many hundreds of years. But my main point is that if we don't keep practicing it and we don't keep digging deeper, we're going to lose these things, that lose what little we already have, what little we have. Okay, let's look at the time. Okay. In that same group article that I wrote, or that I was privileged to write with my Ho'opapa, I interviewed two of my dear friends and my kumu as well about what they feel about innovation itself, and they both have this a little more leaning towards an innovative style, or it seems like they're definitely not afraid to innovate. And the first one was Kainani Kahonaele, and I don't know if she might be watching right now, aloha Kainani, but this is what she says. She says, one of the most prevalent benefits would be to encourage the young people of today, or even our community, to expose our classic mele and our mele forms itself, the style of mele, in the styles that the general community consumes. And unfortunately, Hawaiian music, as we call it, isn't as popular, or isn't as integrated into every household as we would like it to be. because as musicians, we love all kinds of music as well, true? And it's a natural progression, natural evolution to bring our poetry into the musical styles that we love. That is the part that I love, that it's natural. It's natural to innovate. It's natural to evolve, but we need to do this from a learned space. We need to do this from a solid foundation and not just create with no backing behind it or no research. We have to be solid in what we know. And another point too that the next quote will touch upon is that with this innovation, we need to, yes, we can cultural borrowing, right? We can do cultural borrowing and take aspects of other musical styles and bring it, but the main point is to bring it back home, to mix it in with what we do for our people, for our traditions. And this is the second quote. This is by my kumu, Robert Casimiro. And he says, "We innovate just like the rest of the world does, as long as we bring it back to who we are and why we are." And it kind of relates back to what I said too, that innovation, as through looking at the history of Mele itself, right? It's not a question that we innovated before. Our ali'i innovated. They're very innovative people. But the thing that all of these innovations had in common was that it was done for us, or we took something that's new, brought it home, and did it to better all of us Hawaiians itself. And yes, it just ties back into what I was talking about, indigenous innovation as well, that it's for the all, it's for the whole, it's not for the one. Okay, last part. Oh man. Water break. Okay, about 2.5 years, maybe 2 years ago, that's when I kind of started having these ideas about innovation and how we can do this in a appropriate way and a respectful way. So I wrote this song. It's a let's first look at the text itself, right, which is the traditional side. And then I'm going to sing it, hopefully, after my voice is shot to hell from speaking all this time. But yeah, so let's first look at the text itself, and I can kind of explain what I was thinking and what I did. If we look at the text, it looks strophic, right? That's another musical term. Strophic it's verse, 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 or paired couplets in this situation with the same melody throughout. A lot of our mele hula are like that, right? Plenty verses, all the same melody. But it's not. I'll get to that later. So we have that. It ends with a this kind of like ha'ina ia maiana kapuana, this hakumele feature that we see in many songs, or eo mai calling out, puana ia ku'umele, these kind of traditional refrains that we have. It like I talked about personification before, it personifies a lover as a lei. That is another thing of the past, right? Thing that connects this to what came before, genealogically connects it. We have these lexical items that are in the practice itself of hakumele. We have words like nipo and upu and onaona and kupaoa, and this idea of kuia lava, this metaphorical stringing of a lei. That's on the textual side. So if the way I kind of like to think about it is, if I were to give this mele to somebody and without the melody, without the melodic treatment, musical treatment, and I were to tell them, try sing me this song, how do you think it goes? I can almost guarantee, if it's a Hawaiian musician, of course, I can almost guarantee they would sing this song as kind of like a mele hula, you know, all the same melody and all that stuff, because it looks that way. The text, the gift inside the rapping is culturally grounded, or it looks as what came before. But on the melodic side, it's very different, and I'll briefly explain this, and then you can hear it. I set it to 6/8 time, 6 beats in a measure, and 8th note gets a beat. to my knowledge, there's no Hawaiian song that's that was set to something like that. We have duple meter songs, of course, 4/4, 2/4. We have waltz, 3/4, but nothing really that's to me like 6/8 kind of combines the two. There's like this waltzy but kind of a more structured feel to it. Set to that, I use a lot more jazzy chords. I'm a big lover of jazz and R&B, and I'm not going to say that this is an R&B song. It's like pseudo R&B. It's my own kind of thing. Yeah, it utilizes it has a way different harmonic treatment. The form itself is actually like the that popular song form I talked about, a 32 bar A, where the first two verses are the same melody. Then we have like this bridge kind of thing in the third, and then we have the refrain at the end, which comes back to the same melody. Yep, that's it. So hold on. Wow, these talks are hard. Okay. Hope everybody can hear that. So this is how it goes. I'm just going to run it through one time. If I actually record this, it'll probably go through the entire form and then back to the bridge and then to the end, kind of like a hapahole song would do. Something like that. Hope that even went across, because I tried testing that before and the audio gets all messed up for some reason on Zoom. But hope that went across. Yes, and now we're going to wrap this up. We looked at innovation, right, for linguistic and cultural resilience. And the how to do it is by maintaining this balance, right, between tradition and innovation. In the example that I just showed, we have the tradition, right? The traditional form is the text itself. You can even notice that or I hope you notice, I hope I did it justice, that it's phrased in a way that you can hear the language itself. That even though that the melodic treatment is way different, right? There's this, it's like melismatic, or it tried to be melismatic, where there's multiple notes for one syllable, which is something that's actually not common in Hawaiian music. But it's phrased in a certain way that you can understand what I'm saying, and that it's as if that I'm speaking this, or I'm trying to give this Mele life, or give this intention what it deserves. So we have that textual form that's genealogically connected to what came before, as I showed you. On the innovation side, we have the actual treatment of the music itself. This sounds like a modern song. To me, it does, and I hope it does to you guys too. And I hope that this is the kind of song that younger generations would like. It's a more poppy feel, you know, more. I know I don't do a great pop rendition, but it's targeted to them. I wrote this, and I wrote the melody with those people in mind, with someone that, like, if I whip this song out at a bar gig that no one's listening to Hawaiian music, that people will be like, oh, I kind of like this, you know, I don't know what you're saying, but I like it. And hopefully that leads them to, that's the hook that gets them to learn their language and see what came before that. And this last part, and then I don't know if we can do questions, because maybe Lance can chime in on that. I don't know how we'll do that, but I would love to have questions and talk story about this.
This is Bianca, and yes, there are a few questions if you have a few minutes.
Nice, cool.
Okay,
that's
so
actually like
is on your last song. Which came first in the composing of this Mele? Was it the words or the music? That's from David Bob.
It was the words for sure, and that's attributed to what I talked about this logogenic nature of Mele itself. It's the text that really matters. But when you set that text to something that's kind of poppy, right, more targeted towards a younger audience, then it's just, that's the packaging, right? The gift and the packaging.
Another question is, many Hawaiians have non-Hawaiian ancestors. How do experiences from these sides of our families work into the innovation framework?
I hope it does work itself into the innovation framework. I'm half Japanese too, right? But I don't, like I said before too, with the combining tradition and innovation, I don't have knowledge of traditional Japanese musical forms. If I did, maybe that would be a cool thing to combine those two, or combine like the idea I talked about, cultural borrowing too. But going along with what I said, I don't have the facility to do it. I don't have the knowledge myself. And if someone that did, though, someone that's well-versed in one form of music and another, in all ways, textual, musical, and all that stuff, can go for it. I think that would be great.
One more question. This is from Kumu Kaliko Baker. I wonder how an analysis of modern Pacific R&B and other less traditional forms would influence your analysis.
Yeah, I actually, that's really great, actually. I actually plan on doing that. That's a part of my research that I didn't start yet. I've been kind of looking more towards the Hawaiian side at this point. But I plan to look at things like, I'm sure Kum Kaliko, you know, Maisie Rika and stuff like this of New Zealand. New Zealanders have this, with the poe Maori, they have this, they can all sing too, and they have this like affinity to R&B music. They create beautiful, beautiful music set in their language, in Te Reo Maori. And yeah, I'm going to really look into that to see, to look for inspiration and to see how they do it, how they keep things acceptable too. You know, I know that there are people that are very staunch believers of traditionalism and stuff, but how they can balance that out too. Mahalo, Kena Nino.
And one more hopefully simple question, and this is from Kumu Kainoa. What was the name of the article you co-authored, and where can they access it?
Oh, nice. It is, oh gosh, what is it? I believe it's called Hea'ali'i Kuma Kaniau. It's not published yet. It's going to be published in the Winheck Journal that's coming up, University of Victoria. I believe it's going to be published I don't even know if it's the ending of this year, especially with COVID. It might be pushed back. It might be the beginning of next year, but I can actually. How would I send that out? It's Hea'ali Kumakaniau, and then it's hyphen, and there's another Mohawk name because one of our classmates is a Mohawk, and we use these two plants to form a metaphor of resilience and how that the a'ali'i is very firmly rooted and it can resist change, the winds of change, and all these kinds of things. Yeah, I'll try to get that and send it out to you after this. Kainoa.
Yeah, possibly you could just post a link on the Facebook page just as an idea.
That's a great one.
And then let's see. There's another question. How do imagery/metaphors or understandings of particular families that were not commonly shared or widely recognized for generations enter into this traditionalist innovation framework as a form of reclamation or empowerment?
Sorry, I missed the first part. I couldn't hear you.
So, sorry, the first part was how do the imagery and metaphors or even understandings of particular families that were not commonly shared or widely recognized for generations, how do those enter into a traditionalist or innovation framework?
I think that Mary Kavena Pukui quote I commented on too. There's some parts that are bad about that, right? That we're going to lose our understanding of these forms of kauna and whatnot. But I think some of it is actually not good that we lose this this understanding of it. But some of them weren't meant to be understood. Maybe a lot of I'm trying to think if I wrote a song. I might have written a song before that that has kauna in it that I don't want anybody to know about. And I think it's all about intention, like I said before too. If you're writing us, or if the family has these kind of hidden meaning forms or metaphors that they use, and it's meant to not be understood, then I think that's great. It should be kept that way. It's up to the family if they wanted to kind of release that to the public. But yeah, so I guess to answer that question, I believe that it will remain traditional in that family line, but it won't be traditional to everyone as a whole because it's just we don't have the understanding of it itself. I hope that answers the question.
Yeah, there's another one from Kioni Kuoha. Are you only focused on innovation in the music of Mele, or are you considering questions of innovation in Olelo and poetry of Mele?
I think it's like kind of one and the same. I see. For me, this is just like one. I should have said this before. This is just one avenue, kind of, to approach innovation. For me, it's kind of really looking at the text like very traditional, and looking at the innovation or the musical treatment as very innovative, and kind of balancing it 50-50. But I can see too that there has to be many ways of doing this, right? As long as we maintain this kind of balance, that maybe there's some innovation in the text side, the textual side, and some innovation in the musical side, and that. But it's to me the part that's gonna kind of take someone aback is when it's jarring. When even for what I'm doing, if I set this musical treatment to something that's like ridiculous, and especially if it doesn't serve as some kind of like subservient thing to the text itself, it'll be jarring to some people. People hate it. But as long as you have the idea that it's for the text, right? It's to deliver the text to the target audience. I think that's the main thing. But yes, Kioni, I believe that I'm not going to be really looking at that in my dissertation. I'm trying to look at it, balancing it like 50-50, text, tradition, musical treatment, innovation. But I do believe that that's another pathway for sure.
And this one is from Professor Kekoa Harmon, who's going to be our speaker next week.
Yeah, aloha Kekoa.
Besides the Olelo, what brings Hawaiian music home?
Besides the Olelo, what brings Hawaiian music home? Are we talking about Hawaiian music or Mele? I only say that, I jokingly say that because Stillman writes about Hawaiian music too, and that it's basically like any kind of form that's created either in the Hawaiian language or not in the Hawaiian language that's has subject matter based or for Hawaii itself. So in that sense, like if I wrote a song in English that expresses my love for Hawaii, or my if I'm living in the mainland and I express my wanting to come home in the English language, I would say that that is Hawaiian music, but I wouldn't say that that's Mele itself. Right? That's the kind of like the differentiation that I'm trying to show, is that Mele is one thing, Hawaiian music is a different thing. And the thing that makes something a Mele is that idea of logogenic, that that the text has all the importance.
And describe some dense issues like innovation that uses false language, innovation from a shaky foundation, and that hakumele have to be careful with words. The question is, how do you maintain accountability to tradition within a genre form that, at least in a Western colonial conception, is governed by like the idea that it's just a creative individual endeavor? So the question is, what is the structure of accountability, if there is one?
Yeah, see, this is another thing too, that I kind of wanted to go into it in the challenges section, but this is a very hard thing to be kept accountable for. To me, and actually, if Kainani is watching too, we actually talked about this in our interview, that this idea of accountability, and you need like these prerequisites to even try to attempt this kind of like innovation or whatever. But I think that the accountability lies in all of us, in each other. That if I'm a hakumele and I write something and I have all my hakumele friends, we have this idea of paka, right? That a song must be edited and it must be reviewed by other people before you're going to actually give it out. I still practice that. Hi'iaka practiced that in the ka'ao too. So why would we not kind of practice this idea of paka? But even with this, I've showed this to other people. I've showed this to Kainani before and asked her opinion, just to because I respect her greatly as a hakumele and as a scholar who is fluent in her language, knows her cultural practice of hakumele very, very well, and that getting an eye from her is something that's not only gratifying, but it's aponoia. What is it? I feel verified because of it.
I think this might be the last question, and they're referencing Lance Curtis and the Uniques. They rearranged Leahi as rock and roll in the 60s. And so referencing that, can you tell us more on rearranging traditional Mele?
Yeah, that's, this is just personal. I don't want to step on anybody's toes or anything, but personally, it's a hard place to travel when you're gonna take something that you didn't write, especially with going back to that quote that Uncle Kimo said. When you're gonna take something that someone else wrote and you're gonna try to innovate on that, there's danger in that too, because even just responsibility, or I guess responsibility and ownership of it, right? If we take this outside of the context of Hawaiian music, and you created something, I took it and I made my own kind of thing, and I claimed that for me, like that innovative part for me, that's kind of, it can be seen as disrespectful too. But for me, I try to just avoid that totally. And like I said before, that we have these scholars now and these hakumele that actually have the ability to write very great culturally grounded texts, Hawaiian texts based upon what came before and all these things. Why wouldn't we write? We should write. We should contribute to this huge collection of Hawaiian mele that we have, but innovate from a learned space. So yeah, so to answer that directly, personally, I don't practice that. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, but personally, I try to steer away from that, and I rather innovate in this way by creating everything myself.
Well, mahalo for your talk. And I unless you have anything else to say, I think that we came to the end of our questions. We're excited to see your dissertation.
Oh gosh, in 17 years now. Yeah, I had this one last thing. I love philosophy and I love like nerding out on stuff like that. But one thing that I'm finding in my life, especially during this time, is this concept of the middle path. It's a Buddhist thing. but I'm learning in my life like these truths that I don't know if it's the truth of life in general, but in my life, that everything is about balance, really. And that's kind of why the huge topic of this is balance. That you can't really exist at extreme ends of anything. It's always, the universe is going to bring you right back to the middle. If you um, go out drinking one night, you have a great time and you get really, really drunk and you have a lot of fun, the universe is going to balance you back because you're going to have a massive hangover the next day and it'll bring you back to the middle. If you weight train and you work really, really hard, you exert, you cause yourself pain, really, you go on this side, but then the university brings you back by making you stronger and your muscles adapt to it and you get bigger and stronger and whatnot. So I guess, yeah, I kind of wanted to wrap up this talk by saying that like this importance of balance. And I think that if we look at our lives and always with the idea in the back of our heads that, you know, it has to be balance and not to kind of go on an extreme end, I think we'll all be in a really good place. That's it. That's all I got.
Mahalo, Nick Lum, and I hope you you have a chance to look at the comments. There's they're not all questions, but the comments on the HK West Maui page are a lot of them are for you. So.
Great. Yeah, I'll take a look. All right. Thank you, everybody. Mahalo.